They fired her in front of everyone. Not quietly, not privately. The CEO pointed at her limp, laughed, and said, "People like you should be grateful just to be here." No one defended her. No one spoke up. But 3 weeks later, that same man stood in a courtroom, and the judge wasn't looking at her. He was looking at him. Before we continue, if you love underdog stories where the overlooked rise up and win, hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications so you never miss stories like this. It really helps the channel grow. Martha Lewis cleaned offices at night. She moved slowly through the empty hallways, her left leg dragging behind her with each step. A permanent reminder of the car accident that nearly killed her 15 years ago. The crash had shattered her femur in 3 places. Doctors said she'd never walk properly again. Said she'd never work again. She proved them wrong. Every evening at 6 p.m., Martha clocked in. She didn't complain. Didn't ask for special treatment or accommodations. She just showed up, did her job, and went home. Her routine was simple. Start on the 3rd floor, work her way down. Polish the marble floors in the executive wing. Empty the trash bins in every office. Wipe down the conference room tables. Clean the break room kitchen that employees left messy. It took her longer than it would take someone else. Her leg made sure of that. But she never left a job half done. Most nights, she worked alone. The building emptied out by 5:30, and she preferred it that way. No one staring. No one asking uncomfortable questions about her limp. No one pitying her. The few times she crossed paths with late-working employees, they barely acknowledged her. A polite nod, maybe. Most just looked right through her, as if she were part of the furniture. Martha didn't mind. She'd learned long ago that invisible could be peaceful. She had worked at Crow Industries for 7 years. 7 years of showing up on time, never missing a shift, never causing problems. Her supervisor once told her she was the most reliable person on the cleaning staff. But reliability doesn't matter when you become inconvenient. Most people in the building didn't know her name. They didn't know she had a daughter in nursing school. Didn't know she'd been married to a lawyer who passed away from cancer 3 years ago. Didn't know she was 2 years away from paying off her mortgage. They just called her the cleaner. And that was fine with Martha. Until the day it wasn't. Daniel Crow built his empire on a simple philosophy. Weakness is expensive. He didn't tolerate excuses. Didn't tolerate slowness. Didn't tolerate anything that didn't directly contribute to profit margins and quarterly earnings reports. His employees feared him. His competitors respected him. His board of directors worshipped him. Daniel believed that compassion was for people who couldn't afford to be ruthless. And he could afford anything. He drove a custom Bentley. Lived in a penthouse overlooking the city. Wore suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent. His office took up half of the top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows and imported Italian marble. But beneath the expensive veneer was a man who measured human worth in productivity and profit. He'd made his fortune in commercial real estate, buying struggling properties, gutting them, and flipping them for triple the price. Along the way, he displaced families, fired long-time employees, and crushed small businesses without a second thought. To Daniel, it was just business. His employees learned quickly, don't show weakness. Don't ask for help. Don't be a liability. Those who couldn't keep up were cut loose. Quietly, usually, a severance package and an NDA. Clean. Professional. But when the company's third-quarter earnings came in below projections, Daniel wasn't in a quiet mood. The board meeting had been brutal. Shareholders were angry. Stock prices dipped. Investors started asking uncomfortable questions. Daniel needed a scapegoat. Someone to blame. Someone to make an example of. But he couldn't fire an executive. That would signal instability. Couldn't fire middle management. That would hurt operations. He needed someone expendable. Someone invisible. Someone no one would defend. He spent the weekend reviewing budgets, looking for cuts. Payroll. Benefits. Maintenance contracts. That's when he noticed the cleaning staff expenses. And that's when he remembered the woman with the limp. He'd seen her a few times, moving slowly through the halls, dragging that leg behind her. Each time, it irritated him. A visual reminder of inefficiency. Why is she still here? He'd wondered more than once. There are 100 people who could do that job faster. By Monday morning, Daniel had made his decision. He didn't think about her daughter. Didn't think about her mortgage. Didn't think about 7 years of loyal service. He thought about optics. About sending a message. About showing the board he was willing to make tough decisions. And Martha Lewis, the invisible cleaner with the limp, became that message. That Monday morning started like any other for Martha. She received an unusual text from her supervisor. Coming early today. Need the main conference room cleaned by 9 a.m. Executive meeting. Martha arrived at 7:30 a.m., earlier than she'd been to the building in years. The morning light felt strange streaming through windows she usually only saw in darkness. She gathered her supplies, mop, bucket, cleaning solution, and made her way to the executive conference room on the top floor. The room was already pristine, which struck her as odd. But she didn't question it. She started mopping the floor, working methodically from the back of the room toward the entrance. That's when she heard footsteps. Daniel Crow walked in first, his expensive shoes clicking against the marble. Behind him came a crowd, department heads, managers, even some administrative staff. At least 20 people. Martha's stomach dropped. Something was wrong. She stopped mopping and moved to the side, assuming they needed the room. She'd finish later. No. Stay right there, Daniel said, his voice carrying across the room. Everyone fell silent. Martha stood frozen, mop in hand, suddenly aware of how she must look, cleaning uniform, hair tied back, surrounded by people in business attire. Daniel walked closer, his eyes fixed on her leg. Then he smirked. You, he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Why are you still here? Martha's mouth went dry. I work here, Mr. Crow. I'm just cleaning the... I know what you're doing, he interrupted. What I'm asking is why you're still employed. The room felt like it had stopped breathing. Martha tried to keep her voice steady. I've worked here for 7 years, sir. I've never missed a... You slow everyone down. Daniel cut her off again. Look at you. It takes you twice as long to do half the work. We're running a business, not a charity. Someone in the crowd shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke. Martha felt heat rising to her face. Her hands trembled slightly on the mop handle. I do my job well, she said quietly. I've never had complaints. Daniel laughed. Actually laughed. That's because no one wants to be the bad guy and say what everyone's thinking. He looked around the room, as if expecting agreement. A few people looked down at their phones. Others stared at the floor. Daniel turned back to Martha, his voice cold and final. Pack your things. You're fired. Effective immediately. The words hit like a physical blow. Martha's vision blurred slightly. She wanted to scream. Wanted to defend herself. Wanted someone, anyone, in that room to say something. But no one did. The silence was deafening. One woman in the back looked like she might speak, her mouth opening slightly. But when Daniel glanced her way, she went quiet. Phone stayed in pockets. I stayed down. Silence won. Martha took a slow breath. She carefully set the mop back in the bucket. With as much dignity as she could gather, she nodded once. Understood, she said softly. She turned and walked toward the door, each step with her bad leg echoing in the silent room. As she reached the doorway, she heard someone whisper behind her. That was harsh. Another voice replied, Yeah, but what can you do? Martha didn't look back. She went to her locker, gathered her few personal items, a photo of her daughter, her late husband's watch that she kept for luck, a pair of backup shoes. She walked out of Crow Industries for the last time at 8:47 a.m. 23 people had watched her get humiliated. 23 people had stayed silent. And Daniel Crow had no idea what he'd just set in motion. Martha sat in her car in the parking lot for 20 minutes. She didn't cry. She'd run out of tears years ago after her husband died. Instead, she felt something colder, something sharper, clarity. She pulled out her phone and opened her notes app. She'd been keeping a record, not because she expected to need it, but because her late husband had taught her one unshakable habit. Document everything. Always. You never know when you'll need proof. Robert Lewis had been a labor rights attorney for 30 years before cancer took him. He'd spent his career fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves. Workers fired unfairly. Employees discriminated against. People pushed aside by corporations that valued profit over people. He'd made Martha promise something before he died. Don't ever let anyone make you feel less than. And if they try, make sure you have proof. So she kept records. Every comment Daniel had made when he passed her in the halls. She'd written them down. Still dragging around, I see. Must be nice to work at half speed. Surprised they keep you on. She had dates. Times. Witnesses present. She had emails from her supervisor praising her work ethic. Performance reviews that rated her as excellent and reliable. 7 years of spotless employment records. She also had something else. 3 months ago, when Daniel had made a particularly cruel comment about her leg in front of several employees, Martha had filed an informal complaint with HR. Not a lawsuit, just a documented concern. HR had dismissed it, said it was a misunderstanding, said Daniel was just direct in his communication style. But the complaint was on record. In this morning's termination, public, humiliating, explicitly referencing her disability, was also on record. The building had security cameras in every hallway, every conference room. Martha made her second call of the day. The first had been to her daughter to let her know what happened. Her daughter had been furious, ready to drive over immediately. The second call was to someone Robert had worked with for years. A younger attorney who'd taken over some of Robert's cases after he got sick. His name was Marcus Chun, and he specialized in employment discrimination. Marcus answered on the second ring. Martha? It's been a while. How are you? I need your help, Martha said simply. I think I have a case. If you're still watching, drop a comment below telling us what you would have done in Martha's situation. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. We share underdog stories like this every week. When the lawsuit arrived at Crow Industries 3 weeks later, Daniel barely glanced at it. A disabled cleaner suing me, he said to his legal team, tossing the papers on the conference table. This is laughable. Settle it for 20 grand and make it go away. His head attorney, Patricia Morse, read through the complaint more carefully. Daniel, she said slowly, this might be more complicated than you think. Why? She was an at-will employee. I can fire anyone I want. Not for being disabled. Not in front of witnesses. Patricia looked up. She's claiming disability discrimination under the ADA. And she has documentation. Daniel waved a hand dismissively. It's her word against mine. Actually, Patricia said, pulling out her tablet, security footage from that morning shows you explicitly referencing her disability before terminating her. In front of 23 witnesses. For the first time, Daniel's confidence flickered. So, I gave a business reason. She was slow, inefficient. Patricia shook her head. Her performance reviews are flawless. 7 years without a single complaint. You can't claim poor performance when her record says otherwise. Then we'll claim budget cuts. Downsizing. You hired 2 new cleaning staff the same week you fired her. Both at higher pay rates. The room went quiet. Daniel leaned back in a chair. Fina. Offer her $50,000. She'll take it. Martha didn't take it. She didn't take the $100,000 they offered 2 weeks later, either. I don't want money, Martha told Marcus. I wanted to answer for what he did. Are you sure? Marcus asked gently. Court cases are long, stressful, and Crow has expensive lawyers. Martha's voice was steady. My husband spent 30 years fighting people like Daniel Crow. I watched him do it. I learned from him. And I'm not backing down. 6 months later, they were in court. The courtroom filled quickly. Word had spread about the case. Local news picked it up. Disabled worker sues tech CEO for public humiliation. Daniel sat at the defense table, confident in his designer suit, flanked by 3 attorneys. Martha sat across from him with Marcus. The trial lasted 4 days. Witnesses testified. People who'd been in that conference room. Some reluctantly. Some with visible guilt on their faces. Security footage played on screens around the courtroom. Daniel's voice, clear as day. People like you should be grateful just to be here. We're not running a charity. The footage didn't lie. HR records were submitted, including the complaint Martha had filed 3 months before her termination, including HR's dismissal of that complaint. Performance reviews were presented, 7 years of excellent ratings. And then Marcus played his final card, the 2 new hires. Both paid more than Martha. Both hired within a week of her termination. If this was about budget cuts, Marcus said calmly, why hire replacements at higher cost? The defense had no good answer. On the 4th day, the judge, an older man named Howard Shun, no relation to Marcus, leaned forward during closing arguments. He'd been mostly quiet throughout the trial, listening carefully, taking notes. But now he had questions. Mr. Crow, he said, his voice calm but carrying weight. I want to make sure I understand your position. Daniel stood. Yes, Your Honor. You terminated MS. Lewis, in front of 23 employees, explicitly referencing her physical disability, despite 7 years of excellent performance reviews. Is that accurate? Daniel's attorney started to stand, but Daniel waved him off. I made a business decision, Your Honor. Nothing more. The judge nodded slowly. A business decision. I see. He flipped through papers on his desk. And this business decision happened 3 months after MS. Lewis filed an HR complaint about your comments regarding her disability. That's coincidence. Is it? The judge looked up. And the 2 employees you hired to replace her, at higher wages, that's also business? We needed more efficient workers. The judge set down his papers. Mr. Crow, I've been on this bench for 22 years. I've seen a lot of cases. Some complicated. Some simple. This one is remarkably simple. The courtroom went completely silent. You violated federal law, the judge said quietly. The Americans with Disabilities Act exists specifically to prevent exactly what you did. And you didn't just violate the law. You did it publicly, cruelly, and with apparent pride. Daniel's face reddened. The judge continued. But beyond the law, Mr. Crow, you violated something more fundamental. Human decency. Lewis gave your company 7 years of loyal service. She showed up every night, did her job well, asked for nothing special. And you repaid that loyalty by humiliating her in front of her peers. He looked directly at Daniel. The law will address your legal violations. But I want you to understand something personally. People like MS. Lewis are the backbone of companies like yours. They show up. They work hard. They don't make excuses. And they deserve respect. The judge turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll now deliberate. But I want to be clear about the law. If an employer terminates an employee because of a disability and cannot provide legitimate, non-discriminatory reasons for that termination, that is illegal. Period. The jury left to deliberate. They were back in 45 minutes. The verdict was unanimous. The jury found Crow Industries guilty of disability discrimination, wrongful termination, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The damages were substantial. Martha was awarded her lost wages, back pay, front pay for future earnings, compensation for emotional distress. But the punitive damages were what made headlines. The jury decided that Daniel's actions were so egregious, so intentionally harmful, that they warranted punishment beyond compensation. The total, $2. $3 million. Daniel's face went white as the verdict was read. But the consequences didn't stop there. Within a week, the story went viral. News outlets picked it up. Social media exploded. Videos of the security footage circulated online. Public outrage was swift and severe. Crow Industries' biggest clients started pulling contracts. No one wanted to be associated with a CEO who publicly mocked disabled employees. Major sponsors withdrew. The company's carefully cultivated image of corporate responsibility crumbled overnight. Employee morale tanked. Several key executives resigned, not wanting their reputations tied to Daniel's. 2 weeks after the verdict, the board of directors held an emergency meeting. By the end of that meeting, Daniel Crow was out. Not quietly. Not with a golden parachute. The board terminated him for cause, meaning no severance, no benefits, no stock options. They cited conduct detrimental to the company and violation of corporate ethics policies. Daniel fought it, threatened lawsuits, made angry statements to the press about being betrayed by his own board. But the court of public opinion had already ruled. Companies he'd served on boards for quietly asked him to step down. Professional organizations revoked memberships. His name became toxic in business circles. The penthouse stayed. The Bentley stayed. The money in his personal account stayed. But everything else, the power, the respect, the fear he'd commanded, was gone. And Martha? She took the settlement money and did something her husband would have been proud of. She started a foundation, the Robert Lewis Foundation for Workers' Rights. Its mission, helping workers, especially those with disabilities, understand their legal rights, document workplace discrimination, and access legal representation. The foundation offered free consultations, connected people with attorneys, and provided resources for fighting back against employers who violated the law. Within a year, they'd helped 43 people file successful complaints or lawsuits against discriminatory employers. Martha ran the foundation from a small office downtown. She hired 3 staff members, including a young paralegal who'd been fired for taking medical leave. She still walked slowly. The limp never went away. But now, when she walked into rooms, people stood up. They knew her name, and they knew her story. 3 years after the trial, Martha received an invitation to speak at a labor rights conference. She almost declined. Public speaking wasn't her strength. But Marcus convinced her. People need to hear from you directly. Not just about what happened, but about what you did next. So she went. The conference hall held 300 people. Attorneys, activists, workers' rights advocates. When Martha walked onto the stage, the room stood and applauded. She spoke for 15 minutes. She talked about her husband, about the lessons he'd taught her, about documentation, persistence, and refusing to accept injustice. She talked about the morning she was fired, and how silence from 23 people had hurt almost as much as Daniel's words. And she talked about the foundation, about the people they'd helped, about workers who thought they had no power, finding out they did. My husband used to say something, Martha told the crowd. The system protects people who document, who persist, and who refuse to be invisible. She paused. Daniel Crow thought I was invisible, easy to discard, powerless. He was wrong. The applause when she finished was thunderous. Later, at least a dozen people approached her with stories. Workers who'd been mistreated. People who'd stayed silent too long. Martha listened to each one, gave them her card, promised to help however she could. She still walked slowly, but she stood tall. And everywhere she went, she carried proof that quiet people, invisible people, underestimated people can win. If this story moved you, please like this video, subscribe for more powerful underdog stories, and hit that notification bell. These are the stories that need to be told, about ordinary people who refuse to stay down. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.